Welcome to our deep dive into the art of rethinking. You've given us a fascinating collection of sources, mostly focused on Adam Grant's book, Think Again. Audiobook excerpts, research summaries, even some intriguing anecdotes. So get ready to flex those mental muscles.
We're going to explore why rethinking is so crucial in today's world. It's changing so rapidly, and not just why it matters, but how to do it well.
Uncovering hidden biases that even the smartest people can fall prey to.
Oh, yeah.
And learning practical strategies to become better thinkers ourselves, even opening up other people's minds.
It all starts with understanding just how much we can cling to our opinions and how dangerous overconfidence can be.
Grant starts with a gripping story about Wagner Dodge, a smoke jumper facing a life-or-death situation. During a wildfire back in 1949,
1949.
the fire's closing in fast, and he makes a decision that surprises everyone.
Instead of running uphill like everyone else, he actually stops and lights a match, setting fire to the grass in front of him. Can you imagine being on his crew? Talk about a terrifying moment.
Knowing that the wildfire would consume all the fuel in its path, he creates his own controlled burn to make a safe zone. It worked, but his crew initially thought he had lost his mind. So what's the takeaway here? Sometimes our initial instincts, especially under pressure, can lead us down the wrong path.
Down the wrong path.
This is where rethinking comes in. It helps us break free from those ingrained responses and consider unexpected solutions.
And it applies not just to life or death situations, but to everyday decision-making. Think about a time you might have been arguing a point. You were so sure you were right that you completely dismissed the other side.
It's easy to get caught up defending our own position.
This is where a cognitive bias called the Dunning-Kruger effect comes in. It states that the less competent we are in a certain area, the more likely we are to overestimate our abilities.
So we don't know enough to realize how much we don't know.
Bas-
I can definitely see that in action, maybe in myself sometimes too. It's like when you first start learning something new, you think you're a pro, but then you realize how much more there is to learn. But overconfidence can have some serious consequences, right?
Absolutely. Grant gives the example of David Oddsson, Iceland's prime minister during the 2008 financial crisis. He had no background in finance, yet he was incredibly confident in his economic decisions.
That doesn't sound good.
And it wasn't. Oddsson was so sure of himself that he actually disbanded the National Economic Institute. His lack of expertise and his refusal to listen to those with experience contributed to Iceland's financial collapse.
That's a stark reminder of why we need something called confident humility. It's like walking a tightrope between believing in yourself and acknowledging that you don't have all the answers.
Exactly. It's about knowing your strengths, but also recognizing your limitations and being open to learning from others. This reminds me of the story of Hala Tómasdóttir. She ran for president of Iceland despite initially having only 1% support.
1%? That doesn't sound very promising. She must have had some serious self-doubt.
She did, but she also had confident humility. She was determined to learn, sought advice from experts, constantly adapting her approach. Ultimately, even though she didn't win, she came in second place, even beating Davy Oddsson.
So her willingness to learn and adapt was a key factor in her success. This connects to the idea of having a growth mindset, the belief that our abilities aren't fixed, but can be developed through effort and learning.
That's a core principle of rethinking. It encourages us to embrace challenges, even when they seem intimidating, and to see setbacks not as failures, but as valuable opportunities to learn and grow.
But here's a question. Do you think rethinking always has to be about serious topics, like economics or politics? What about our everyday lives?
It's relevant to everything. It can even be about our personal beliefs, our habits, our relationships, anything. In fact, Grant argues that we should find joy in being wrong.
I'll be honest. I don't usually celebrate my mistakes. It's a little hard to wrap my head around that. What's joyful about being wrong?
Think of it this way. Being wrong means you've learned something new. You're closer to the truth than you were before. Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman actually loves discovering he's wrong, because it means he's less wrong than before. It's about progress, not perfection.
That's a great perspective. It takes the sting out of making mistakes.
And this all links back to intellectual humility, recognizing that you don't have all the answers, and being open to changing your mind. It's a hallmark of truly great thinkers and lifelong learners.
So you've seen the power of rethinking in extreme situations and in personal growth. But how do we encourage this kind of thinking in others, especially when they might be resistant to new ideas?
That's where things get really interesting. Grant tells this fascinating story about a debate champion, Harish Natarajan, who went head-to-head with, get this, an AI.
Way to debate against artificial intelligence. That's intriguing.
It was Project Debater, developed by IBM. Natarajan could have focused on presenting facts and figures, trying to overwhelm the audience with information, but he took a different approach.
What did he do?
He focused on asking thoughtful questions, prompting the audience to re-examine their own assumptions and think critically about the issue at hand. Essentially, he transformed the debate into a collaborative exploration of ideas.
So it wasn't about winning or losing, but about encouraging a deeper understanding of the topic from both sides.
Exactly. And it worked. Natarajan swayed a significant portion of the audience. It proves that curiosity can be more persuasive than simply trying to win an argument. Instead of trying to force our opinions on others, we can invite them to explore ideas together, fostering a more open and productive dialogue.
Now let's move on to something that can be incredibly tough to rethink. Stereotypes and prejudice. Grant uses a somewhat surprising example to illustrate this point. The age-old rivalry between the Yankees and the Red Sox.
A rivalry that goes way beyond baseball. It's about how easily we form negative opinions about groups, even based on something as seemingly insignificant as which team we root for.
Researchers actually used this rivalry to conduct an experiment. They asked fans to list negative things about their rivals, and the results were fascinating.
It turned out they used almost identical stereotypes, accents, clothing choices. It wasn't really about the other team as individuals, but more about tribalism and ingrained biases.
So even though these fans had probably never even met most of their rivals, they had all these preconceived notions about them.
And it highlights how deeply ingrained stereotypes can be, preventing us from seeing people as individuals. But Grant doesn't stop there. He also shares the inspiring story of Daryl Davis, a Black musician who befriended members of the Ku Klux Klan.
Now that's something you don't hear every day. How did he manage that?
His approach was truly remarkable. Instead of confronting or arguing, he approached them with curiosity and a genuine desire to understand their perspectives. He asked them, "How can you hate me if you don't even know me?"
He essentially challenged them to see beyond the stereotype, to see him as a person.
And through open, honest conversations, he was able to help many of them rethink their beliefs and even leave the organization. It's a powerful testament to the power of human connection. It suggests that even the most deeply held prejudices can be challenged through genuine dialogue and a willingness to see the humanity in others.
We've seen how rethinking can change minds in everything from high-stakes situations to deeply personal beliefs. But what about our approach to learning itself? How can we cultivate a mindset of rethinking in education?
Grant challenges some traditional ideas about learning. He suggests that lectures, even engaging ones, might not be the most effective method.
Really? So all those TED Talks I've been watching might not be the best way
For learning. They're certainly entertaining, but research indicates that active learning leads to a much deeper understanding.
It makes sense when you think about it. If you're passively listening, information tends to go in one ear and out the other.
Exactly. Grant cites a physics experiment where students learned more from hands-on sessions than from lectures, even though they enjoyed the lectures more.
So it's not just about absorbing information, but about actively engaging with it, asking questions, testing ideas, and applying what you've learned.
That's the key. And this idea extends beyond the classroom. It applies to workplaces, communities, really any environment where learning takes place. We need to create cultures that encourage experimentation and questioning, not just memorization and regurgitation.
For that, Grant highlights examples from organizations known for their innovation and impact. NASA and the Gates Foundation. What can we learn from them?
These institutions prioritize learning and continuous improvement. They've cultivated what's called psychological safety, meaning that people feel comfortable admitting mistakes, expressing doubts, and even challenging those in authority without fear of negative consequences.
That kind of environment must be crucial for innovation and growth.
It absolutely is. It's about fostering an environment where people are encouraged to think critically and challenge the status quo.
All of this learning and growth leads us to Grant's final point, the importance of unlearning.
Unlearning is about recognizing that what we once knew might no longer be relevant or even true. We need to let go of outdated beliefs and assumptions that are holding us back.
It's like decluttering your mind, making space for new ideas and fresh perspectives. But this can be incredibly difficult. It's hard to admit that something you once believed might no longer be valid.
It's like realizing that your favorite childhood toy isn't as magical as you once thought.
It can be a little bittersweet,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly liberating.
It's about recognizing that our beliefs are constantly evolving, just like we are. Unlearning is a sign of intellectual growth, a willingness to adapt and change.
Yeah, it's a powerful message. We've covered so much ground already, but I can already feel my mind shifting, becoming more open to new possibilities. And that's just the beginning of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the art of rethinking.
We've been exploring the power of confident humility, the joy of being wrong, and even how stereotypes can cloud our judgment.
Now let's shift gears and delve into how we can actually open other people's minds to new ways of thinking.
Grant uses a fascinating example from the world of baseball to illustrate this.
Remember that intense rivalry between the Yankees and the Red Sox we talked about earlier? Researchers decided to use that rivalry as a testing ground for breaking down stereotypes.
So what did they do? Did they make Red Sox fans watch hours of Yankees highlights?
Not quite. They had Red Sox fans reflect on the randomness of their team loyalty. Imagine being asked to consider how if you'd been born into a family of Yankees fans, you'd likely be cheering for the Bronx Bombers yourself.
Wow, that's a real mind bender. It makes you realize how much of our identity is shaped by factors outside our control.
Exactly. And the results were pretty amazing. Fans who engaged in this reflection were less likely to pick a super spicy hot sauce for their rival team's stadium, and were even more willing to support their rivals in ways that would normally be unthinkable.
So they were basically saying, hey, if I had been born in a different zip code, I might be the one wearing pinstripes.
It's a simple exercise, but it seemed to chip away at their ingrained us versus them mentality. It's a reminder that sometimes all it takes to shake up our stereotypes is to recognize their often arbitrary origins. And this connects back to Daryl Davis's approach with KKK members.
Right, he didn't try to argue them out of their beliefs, but instead asked, how can you hate me when you don't even know me?
He challenged them to confront the actual human being behind the stereotype, forcing them to reevaluate their assumptions. It wasn't about winning a debate, but about fostering understanding.
It seems like creating a space for genuine dialogue is crucial for real change to happen. Speaking of dialogue, I think it's time we talk about the art of listening. I know I can be guilty of thinking about my response while someone else is talking, instead of really hearing what they have to say.
It's something we all struggle with. Grant highlights the power of a technique called motivational interviewing. Therapists often use it to help people make positive changes in their lives.
So how does it work? Is it like giving someone a pep talk?
It's quite different from that. Instead of telling people what to do or arguing with them, motivational interviewing focuses on asking open-ended questions, listening carefully to their answers, and acknowledging their autonomy.
It sounds like it's about guiding someone towards their own conclusions, rather than imposing your views on them.
Exactly. Grant shares a compelling story about a doctor in Quebec named Jean-François Arnaud, who uses this technique to talk to parents who are hesitant about vaccinating their children.
That's a topic that can generate a lot of heated arguments, but rarely changes anyone's mind.
Arnaud gets that parents often have genuine concerns, so he approaches them with empathy and respect. Instead of lecturing them about the science, he asks where they get their information and what specific worries they have. He listens to their answers without judgment.
That must be so powerful for those parents. It shows that he truly cares about their concerns and isn't just trying to win the argument.
It creates a safe space for dialogue and often allows him to address their concerns in a way that helps them make informed decisions about their children's health.
It's a great reminder that listening can sometimes be the most persuasive approach of all. Now, moving on from the importance of listening, let's talk about embracing complexity.
We live in a world that often pushes us towards simple solutions and black and white thinking.
I see that all the time on social media. It's like everyone's trying to reduce complex issues down to a catchy hashtag.
But complex problems rarely have easy answers. Grant argues that we need to resist the urge to oversimplify and instead embrace the nuances and uncertainties that exist in many situations.
So how do we do that? How do we become more comfortable with ambiguity?
One way is to avoid binary thinking, that tendency to see things as either right or wrong, good or bad. It's like those online polls where you only get two choices, but the real answer is probably somewhere in between.
I'm definitely guilty of that. Sometimes I get so caught up in an argument that I forget there might be other perspectives.
It's a common trap. Grant uses a compelling example of research on gun control to show how harmful this kind of thinking can be.
That's an issue that's often incredibly polarized. It feels like people are either fiercely for it or fiercely against it.
And that's exactly what researchers wanted to change. Instead of presenting gun control as a simple yes or no question, they framed it as a complex issue with various perspectives, trade-offs, and potential solutions.
So they were acknowledging the gray areas, instead of pretending everything was black and white.
Precisely. And the results were Pretty amazing. People were more willing to reconsider their own positions and engage in respectful, productive conversations. It showed that acknowledging complexity can make people more open to different viewpoints.
That's encouraging. It suggests that even on the most contentious issues, there's hope for finding common ground if we're willing to embrace the complexity.
It's about moving beyond simplistic answers and engaging with the messiness of real-world problems. Speaking of messiness, let's revisit education. We talked about the limitations of lectures, but what are some alternatives that encourage rethinking?
I'm really intrigued by this idea of creating learning cultures. You mentioned that before in relation to NASA and the Gates Foundation.
These organizations prioritize experimentation, questioning, and continuous learning. They're environments where people feel safe to take risks, admit mistakes, and even challenge the status quo.
That sounds like a far cry from the traditional classroom, with rows of desks and a teacher lecturing at the front.
Grant gives an example of how this works in practice, drawing on the experiences of Ellen Ochoa, the first Hispanic woman in space.
She's such an inspiration. I remember reading about her journey.
When Ochoa became director of the Johnson Space Center, she wanted to create a learning culture within NASA. This was crucial, especially after the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster, which was partly caused by faulty assumptions and poor communication.
So how did she change the culture at NASA? Did she institute mandatory brainstorming sessions?
One key change was encouraging people to ask more questions, even seemingly basic ones. She understood that sometimes the most important insights come from questioning what everyone else takes for granted.
It's about having the courage to speak up and say, wait a minute, why are we doing it this way? Even if it means questioning long-held assumptions or challenging people in authority.
Exactly. She also emphasized process accountability, which means evaluating not just the outcome of a decision, but how that decision was made.
So even if a project is successful, if the decision-making process was flawed, that's still a problem.
It means the success might have been due to luck, not sound judgment. And next time they might not be so lucky. Ochoa wanted to ensure that NASA was learning from both successes and failures, constantly refining its processes to improve decision-making.
That's a valuable lesson for any organization. But how can we apply these principles of rethinking to our own lives?
Grant offers a ton of practical advice, but one suggestion is to start thinking more like a scientist.
I love that. It's about approaching our beliefs and opinions with curiosity and a willingness to test our assumptions against the evidence.
It means being open to new information, questioning our biases, and being willing to revise our views when the evidence demands it. And it's not just about being open to new information, but actively seeking it out, even if it challenges our existing beliefs.
So instead of just hanging out in our own echo chambers, we need to actively seek out different perspectives.
You need to burst those filter bubbles, follow people on social media who hold different views, read books and articles that challenge your assumptions, have conversations with people who disagree with you. It's about stepping outside our comfort zones and embracing intellectual discomfort.
Because that's where real learning happens. Now, are there any specific techniques we can use to become better rethinkers?
One technique Grant suggests is to create what he calls a challenge network.
Okay, a challenge network. What is that, and how do I sign up?
It's a group of people you trust to provide honest feedback and push your thinking. These are the friends, colleagues, or family members who aren't afraid to disagree with you, to point out your blind spots, and help you see things from different angles.
So they're not just there to tell you you're brilliant.
They're like your personal rethinking advisors. The key is to be receptive to their feedback, even if it's hard to hear.
That's definitely the tough part. But confident humility plays a role here too, right? Recognizing that we don't know everything and being willing to learn from others.
Exactly. This has been a pretty deep dive into the world of rethinking so far. But there's one more crucial aspect we need to explore: unlearning.
We touched on it briefly before, but I'm ready to really dig into this idea.
It's not simply forgetting what we've learned, but being willing to let go of outdated beliefs and assumptions that no longer serve us.
It's like realizing that the map you've been using is outdated and no longer leads to the destination you're trying to reach.
Grant compares it to renovating a house. If you want to expand and modernize, you might need to tear down some old walls and structures
to make room for something new and better. Can you give some examples of what unlearning might look like in practice?
It could mean letting go of outdated stereotypes you might have, abandoning ineffective work habits that no longer serve you, or questioning long-held assumptions about yourself and the world.
It's like recognizing that some of our knowledge and beliefs have become mental fossils, interesting relics of the past, but not useful in the present.
And just like paleontologists constantly update their understanding of dinosaurs, as they discover new fossils, we need to be willing to update our own mental models as we gain new knowledge and experiences.
That's a great analogy. But how do we know when it's time to unlearn something? What are some signs that our beliefs might need a refresh?
One sign is when you find yourself clinging to a belief, despite evidence to the contrary. It's like refusing to update your GPS, even though it keeps leading you in the wrong direction.
So when we're basically ignoring reality, because it doesn't fit our preconceived notions.
Another sign is feeling cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable feeling of holding conflicting beliefs or values.
Like when we say we care about the environment, but still drive a gas guzzler.
Or when we claim to value open-mindedness, but shut down conversations that challenge our perspectives. Those are definite red flags.
It sounds like those moments of discomfort can be valuable opportunities for growth and rethinking.
Absolutely. Unlearning is a sign of intellectual courage and a commitment to truth. Now, all of this talk about unlearning might feel a bit heavy. It's important to remember that rethinking isn't always about dismantling deeply held beliefs. Sometimes it's about questioning our everyday habits and routines.
That's a good reminder. It makes rethinking seem more approachable, like something we can incorporate into our daily lives.
Grant gives the example of Simone Biles, the legendary gymnast. She's known for her incredible talent and daring routines, but she's also incredibly strategic about her training and performance.
She's not just physically gifted, she's incredibly mentally strong.
And a big part of that mental strength is her willingness to constantly reevaluate her approach. For example, a few years ago, she started practicing a move called the Yurchenko double pike, which is insanely difficult.
I can't even imagine attempting that.
But even though she had mastered the move in practice, she decided not to perform it at the Olympics.
Why not? Wouldn't that have given her a huge advantage over her competitors?
She recognized that the risks outweighed the rewards. The landing was incredibly difficult, and she didn't want to jeopardize her overall performance or her well-being for one risky move.
That shows incredible discipline and self-awareness. She was willing to rethink a decision, even though it meant potentially sacrificing a medal.
It highlights the importance of knowing your limits and prioritizing long-term goals over short-term gains. It's about recognizing that sometimes the best decision is to say no to something, even if it seems like a great opportunity.
It's about having the wisdom to know when to push yourself and when to hold back.
Exactly. And this applies to all areas of life, from our careers to our relationships to our personal goals. Sometimes the most successful path isn't the most obvious one. It requires us to step back, reevaluate, and maybe even choose a different direction.
That's such an empowering message. It suggests that we have more control over our lives than we might think.
We have the power to choose what we believe, how we think, and how we act. And that's what rethinking is all about.
So we've explored how to rethink our own beliefs, challenge stereotypes, and even create learning cultures. But how do we turn rethinking into a habit? How do we make it a part of our daily lives?
One of the most effective ways is to simply ask more questions instead of jumping to conclusions or accepting things at face value. Try to cultivate a sense of curiosity about everything.
So instead of saying, that's just the way it is, we should ask, why is it this way? And could there be a better way?
You got it. It's about challenging the status quo and looking for opportunities to improve, even in seemingly mundane areas of your life. And this applies to your interactions with others, too.
So instead of just agreeing with someone, we should ask questions that encourage them to think more deeply about their own beliefs.
Instead of saying, I agree, you could say, tell me more about why you think that, or what led you to that conclusion. Those are much more interesting and engaging conversation starters.
It shows that you're truly interested in their perspective, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Exactly. And those questions can often lead to surprising insights and new ways of thinking.
Now, I'll admit, I sometimes get really attached to my own ideas. It's hard to let go of something. You put a lot of thought and energy into it.
I hear you. That's why it's important to create what Grant calls a detachment zone.
A detachment zone.
Ah.
That sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
It's about separating your ego from your ideas. Instead of seeing your opinions as extensions of yourself, view them as separate entities that can be examined, challenged, and even revised.
It's like taking a step back and looking at your beliefs from a more objective perspective.
Exactly. This detachment allows you to evaluate your own thinking more clearly and be more open to changing your mind when the evidence warrants it.
It's recognizing that your beliefs are not who you are, but simply tools you use to navigate the world. And sometimes you need to upgrade your tools.
Now, here's a powerful question that Grant suggests asking yourself. What evidence would change my mind?
That's a great one. It forces you to confront your own biases and to really think about what it would take for you to shift your perspective.
If you can't come up with any evidence that would change your mind, it might be a sign that you're clinging to that belief for emotional reasons rather than rational ones.
It's a reminder to be intellectually honest with yourself and to be open to adjusting your views as you learn and grow.
Now, this next suggestion might sound counterintuitive, but Grant encourages us to embrace the joy of being wrong.
I know we talked about this before, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. How can being wrong be a good thing?
Remember, it's not about celebrating making mistakes, but about reframing them as opportunities to learn and grow. It's shifting your perspective from, I was wrong, so I'm a failure, to, I was wrong, and now I know something new.
That's a much more positive way to look at it.
It's about cultivating intellectual humility and recognizing that we're all works in progress. And that brings us to one final strategy: practicing the art of unlearning.
We've touched on this a few times already. But how can we actively engage in unlearning? What does that look like in practice?
One technique is to regularly reevaluate your beliefs and assumptions, asking yourself if they still hold true based on your current knowledge and experiences.
So it's like doing a mental spring cleaning, getting rid of outdated beliefs that might be cluttering up your thinking.
You could even set aside time each week to reflect on what you've learned and what you might need to unlearn.
It's about making continuous learning and growth a part of your life, recognizing that rethinking is an ongoing process.
And that's what makes it so exciting. We're constantly evolving and expanding our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
This has been such an insightful deep dive into the world of rethinking. We've covered so much ground already, from cognitive biases to the power of curiosity to the importance of unlearning.
And we've explored practical strategies for becoming better thinkers, influencing others, and creating cultures that embrace learning.
But before we wrap things up, let's take a moment to process all this information. We'll be right back with some final thoughts on how to put these ideas into practice. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into rethinking.
We've explored the power of confident humility, the joy of being wrong, and even how to create a challenge network to help us see our blind spots.
Now let's talk about how we can actually make rethinking a habit in our everyday lives.
One of the simplest yet most powerful strategies is to just ask more questions.
I'm all for asking questions, but what kind of questions are we talking about?
Instead of jumping to conclusions or taking things at face value, cultivate a sense of curiosity about everything you encounter.
So instead of saying, that's just the way it is, I should be asking, why is it this way? Could there be a better way?
That's the spirit. It's about challenging the status quo and seeking out opportunities for improvement, even in the most ordinary aspects of life. And this approach can transform your interactions with others, too.
So instead of simply agreeing or disagreeing with someone, I could ask questions that encourage them to explore their own perspectives more deeply.
Exactly. Instead of saying, I agree, try asking, what makes you think that? Or what experiences have shaped your view on this?
Those questions show that you're genuinely interested in understanding where they're coming from, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
And those conversations can lead to some really unexpected insights and shared learning experiences.
I know I'm guilty of getting attached to my own ideas. It's hard to let go of something you've invested time and energy in.
I hear you. That's why it's important to create what Grant calls a detachment zone.
A detachment zone. What is that exactly?
Think of it as separating your ego from your ideas. Your opinions aren't an extension of yourself. They're separate entities that you can examine, challenge, and even revise without it being a personal attack.
So it's about creating a little psychological distance between ourselves and our beliefs.
Exactly. This detachment allows you to be more objective when evaluating your own thinking and more open to changing your mind when presented with new information.
It's like recognizing that our beliefs are tools we use to navigate the world. And sometimes we need to upgrade those tools to better suit our needs.
Here's another powerful question Grant suggests we ask ourselves. What evidence would change my mind?
Yeah, that's a tough one, but so important. It forces us to confront our own biases and to think about what would actually make us reconsider a belief.
If you can't think of any evidence that would change your mind, it might be a sign that you're holding on to that belief for emotional reasons rather than rational ones.
It's a call to be intellectually honest with ourselves and be willing to adjust our views as we learn and grow.
Now, here's a concept we've touched on before, but it's worth revisiting. Grant encourages us to embrace the joy of being wrong.
I'm getting better at this, but it still feels a little strange to celebrate being wrong.
Remember, it's not about reveling in your mistakes, but about seeing them as valuable learning opportunities. It's about shifting your perspective from, I was wrong, so I'm a failure, to, I was wrong, and now I've learned something new.
That's a much more positive way to look at it.
It's about having the humility to admit when we
Yeah.
don't have all the answers. And that brings us to our final strategy, practicing the art of unlearning.
We've talked about this in relation to stereotypes and outdated information. But I'm curious to hear more about how we can actively engage in unlearning.
It's about regularly revisiting your beliefs and assumptions and asking yourself, do these still hold true based on what I know now?
So it's like taking inventory of our mental models, making sure they're up to date, and serving us well.
You could even make it a weekly practice to reflect on what you've learned and what you might need to unlearn. It's about making continuous learning and growth a part of your life.
It sounds like rethinking is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
And that's what makes it so exciting. We're constantly evolving and expanding our understanding of ourselves and the world.
This deep dive into the art of rethinking has been incredibly eye-opening. We've explored a wide range of concepts, from cognitive biases to the power of curiosity to the importance of unlearning.
And we've discussed practical strategies for becoming better thinkers ourselves, for opening other people's minds, and even for creating cultures that embrace learning and growth.
The key takeaway for me is that rethinking isn't just a mental exercise. It's a way of approaching life with humility, curiosity, and a willingness to learn and grow.
It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers and being open to new information, even when it challenges our existing beliefs.
The more we practice rethinking, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the complexities of this world, to solve challenging problems, and to connect with people who hold different perspectives.
So as you go forward, remember to embrace the joy of being wrong, ask more questions, and never stop rethinking.
And with that, we leave you with a final question to ponder. What belief or opinion are you ready to rethink?